Hello, my name is Haley Yarbrough, and today I will be demonstrating the Venn diagram reading strategy with a science lesson. So we know that the periodic table is split into three categories: metals, which are in orange, non-metals, which are in pink, and metalloids, which are right here in green. But we don't know what causes them to be metals, non-metals, or metalloids. They all have different characteristics, and one way to figure out the similarities and differences between metals, non-metals, and metalloids is to make a Venn diagram. So before we would even start doing the Venn diagram, we would list out all the different characteristics of metals, non-metals, and metalloids, or whatever else we were trying to find out, and see what they have in common and what they do not have in common. So for first, metals are malleable, which means easy to hammer without it breaking. Ductile, which means flexible. Luster, which is shiny. They have high density. They are good conductors of heat and electricity. And they have a high melting point, and they are hard. And nonmetals are not malleable or ductile. They are dull. They have low density. They are poor conductors of heat and electricity. They have a low melting point, and they are brittle solids, and they are gases at room temperature. Metalloids are ductile, malleable. They can be shiny or dull. They are average conductors of heat and electricity. They are solid at room temperature. So we're going to look at our list and see what they have in common. So I can see that metals are malleable and ductile, as well as metalloids are. So I'm going to circle these in red. This will show that they are similar in this aspect. Also, they're also shiny, so these are similar as well. Now we're going to look again and see if we can see any more. So we see that they both can be dull, so we will circle that in blue to signify that the nonmetals and metalloids have something in common. Now we're going to see if they all have something in common. Well, I see that they at least all conduct some form of heat and electricity, so we will circle that in purple to signify that they all have this part in common. Now we have this list, and now that we are done looking at it, we're going to see if they have anything else in common, which they don't. So whatever's left over is going to go in its separate circle, which I will show you in a second. Okay, so now we are going to draw our Venn diagram. Start with a circle in the top left corner. And now make sure that the circle overlaps and draw a second circle. And now we will draw a third circle overlapping both of the circles. So just make sure that there are separate sections for each part. Now, what we're going to do is label them. So this will be metals. This will be non-metals. And this will be metalloids. And now we will put these separate. Looking at this sheet earlier, we will put our separate characteristics in each of these outer bubbles. For example, I will put that metal has high density. They have high melting points. And they are hard. Okay. Now we will do the same for nonmetals. Looking from our sheet earlier, they are not malleable. Not ductile. low density, low melting point, brittle, and gases at room temp. So this one is full. Now we will look at our metalloids and put those ones that are not circled into their individual box. So looks like the only one is solid at room temp. Rupture. Okay. Now, see, we have these overlapping ones. This is where we will put the information that we circled earlier. So, since we circled malleable, ductile, luster in both metals and metalloids, we will put it in the one where they overlap. So, now we will look and see which ones we circled for nonmetals and metalloids. And it looks like the only one is that they can be dull. And now we will look at what we circled for all three, which was conducting electricity, and we will put it in this center one since it encompasses all of these elements. And looking at our Venn diagram, we can see that metals and metalloids have the most in common, while nonmetals and metalloids only have one thing in common, and all three only have one thing in common, while metals and nonmetals have nothing in common other than this. So that is how you use a Venn diagram. A pro that for using Venn diagrams is it is a great way to organize information. Con would be that it can be kind of time consuming, and like I mentioned earlier, unless you draw your circles really big, it can be kind of hard to read and write inside of them. But that is how you use a Venn diagram reading strategy for a science lesson.